She didn't know she was drawing, just that her hand moved slow and careful, tracing 2 circles in the dirt, then a curved line beneath them, then the faintest dot for a nose, a face small, too small. She didn't blink. The eyes stared back at her, wide and uneven, the way a baby's eyes stayed open even when asleep. She touched the left one, smudged it. "You see him too." The voice was behind her, not loud, not surprised. She froze, hands still pressed in the dirt. "You left him in the cold." She turned her head, but not her body. He stood a few feet back, boots stained with dust, coats older than they should have been. "I didn't leave him," she said. "You think the ground warmed him." She stood up slowly, brushed her hands on her skirt. Her fingers shook. "Why are you here?" "Same reason you are." She stared at him. The wind moved through the dry grass, low and restless. "You said you weren't coming back," she said. "I said I wouldn't unless it thawed." She looked down at the dirt again. The baby's face was still there, clear, watching. "It ain't thawed," she said. "It will." She looked at his hands, empty. No badge, no gun, just rough knuckles and cracked nails. "You still wear that coat like it means something." "It doesn't," he said. "That's the problem." She crouched again. Her finger hovered over the drawing, then stopped. "I didn't mean to touch it," she said. "Yeah, you did." She wiped the dirt with her palm. The face disappeared. "You come to blame me again?" "I came because he looks like him." She looked up. Her throat tightened. "You never saw his face." "I see it now." She stood again. Her voice dropped low. "Don't talk like you held him." He stepped closer. "But I buried him." She moved fast. One step. Her palm landed flat on his chest. "You weren't there." "I dug the hole after you ran." "You lie." "You bled on the floor, screamed till your throat gave out. Then nothing. When I came back, the fire was cold. And you were gone." She didn't speak. "I followed the prince to the river, just one set. Yours." She turned away. "I wrapped him in your apron, that blue one with the loose hem, you remember?" "Don't." "You left it by the hearth." She picked up a small stone and turned it in her hand. Didn't throw it. Just hold it. "I didn't know if he was breathing," she said. "I didn't know what to do." He took a breath, rough and shallow. "I put him under the old elm, same place your mama planted herbs." She clenched the stone tighter. "He was light," he said. "Like nothing." She turned to him, voice dry. "You think that makes you holy?" "No." "You think that makes it yours?" "I think it makes me part of it." She looked at his eyes, still green, still tired. "You could have come after me. You told me not to. You could have come anyway." "I did." She stepped back. Her voice cracked. "Too late. I saw the cradle by the fire, empty, cold. You saw what I wanted you to see. Then why draw his face?" She didn't answer. They stood there in silence. The wind is stronger now, kicking up dust, erasing what little remained of the drawing. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled something out. "I kept this. A pacifier. Cracked. One string of thread still wrapped around it. I found it in the ashes," he said. "Didn't burn all the way." She stared at it. Didn't take it. He held it out. "You think I forgot?" She backed away. "I don't want it." "You think this town forgot?" She laughed once, bitter and sharp. "This town forgets everything but the blood." He looked down at the dirt. "You think they'd forgive you?" "No." "You think they'd hang me first?" "They already did." She crouched again, slow, pressed her fingers into the dirt, not drawing this time, just feeling it. "He moved once," she said. "Just once, right after." He crouched too. Their hands almost touched. "You thought he was breathing?" "I hoped." She dug her nails in, leaving 4 crescent scars in the soil. "I was scared," she said. "So was I. I thought if I walked far enough, the pain would stay behind. It didn't." She looked up at him. "You think ghosts follow the strong?" "No," he said. "Just the guilty." She stood, brushed her hands again. He stood too. "You still live at the edge of town?" "No." "The old cabin?" "It's gone." "Where then?" "Nowhere." He tilted his head. "You just come back to remember?" "I never left." "You stayed hidden." "Same as you." The wind dropped. Stillness fell over them. "You still got his name?" he asked. She nodded. "You say it?" "Sometimes." He paused. "Have you ever given it to anyone else?" "No." He looked past her, toward the old church in the distance. They're cleaning out the basement. She flinched. Why? The new sheriff says it smells wrong. It always did. He looked at her. You want to see what they find? No. You scared? Always. He offered the pacifier again. You should bury it. I already buried too much. He dropped it on the dirt, let it sit there, soft against the ground. Maybe this time, he said, it stays buried. She didn't move, didn't nod. He started to walk away. She watched him go, then bent down and picked it up. The wind blew once more. This time, she didn't let go. The sheriff's fingers were rough, his grip tight as he pressed the old badge to her chest. The metal was cold against her skin, a weight she didn't need but had been given anyway. He didn't look at her face, just Ed. The badge, like it was his way of telling her everything she needed to know. You want justice? His voice was low, mocking. Wear it. She didn't flinch. She didn't even move. Her eyes stayed fixed on the dirt, the small specks of straw beneath her boots. She could feel it, the weight of the badge, heavy but hollow, just like the promises he'd made, just like the ones she had stopped believing in. The barn smelled of dry wood, sweat, and something older, the kind of smell that gets into your bones and never leaves. You know what it means, he said. It means you got the law, you got the power, you have the right to take what's yours. She didn't answer him. I didn't need to. She reached up slow, her fingers trembling for a moment before she touched the badge. The light from the doorway glinted off it, dull and faded, like it had seen too many years and too many things, like it wasn't what it once had been. You think it's yours? He asked, his breath sour like whiskey and dust. She closed her fingers around it, feeling the metal bite into her palm. No, she whispered. I think it was always yours. His face twisted for a second, the words hitting harder than he expected. He stepped back, just a half step, but it was enough. The barn door creaked, the wind outside rattling the wooden frame. He didn't look at her when he spoke again. You think it makes you a part of it? She didn't answer, but her hand moved, grazing the badge again, the edges rough, the metal chipped. She whispered the name, barely a breath. James. His breath caught for just a second, but he hit it quickly, turning his back, pacing a few steps toward the hayloft. She could hear the soft scrape of his boots on the floorboards, the rhythm of his steps marking time like a clock she couldn't escape. Did he ever say it? He asked, not looking at her. Did he ever tell you what you were worth? What did you deserve? She stood silent, her fingers pressed tight against the badge, holding it like it was something fragile, something that might break if she let it go. The name lingered in the air between them, the weight of it heavier than anything else in the room. You think I didn't try, she said, her voice steady but quiet. You think I didn't want to know? He turned quickly and his eyes were sharp, too sharp. The anger was there, buried deep, but she could feel the hesitation, the crack in his armor. Then wear it, he said. Wear it and show them you're here. Show them you're in charge. The words hit harder than they should have. She could feel the sting in her chest, like something had cut deep. But she didn't show it. She didn't let him see. She could feel the badge pressing against her skin, the coldness of it seeping through her dress, like it was trying to bury itself in her. But she didn't take it off, didn't hand it back. She just stood there. He shook his head, took a step closer. You think they'll listen? He asked. You think they'll care? They always listen, she said, her voice quieter now, but steady. It's just that they don't care. The sheriff stood there for a moment, his eyes flicking down to the badge, his fingers twitching as if he might rip it off her chest. But he didn't. Instead, he reached for the door, his hand brushing against the worn wood of the frame, the same place it always was. She didn't move, didn't say a word. You still think you're better than me? He asked, his voice barely a whisper, as if he was trying to convince himself. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The barn felt colder now, the light outside dimming, the shadows creeping in like they always did. She could feel it in the air, the weight of the past settling on her shoulders, the ghosts of the things she had tried to leave behind. The sheriff's hand hovered on the door. He didn't look back at her. I'll see you again, he said, his voice flat now. And when I do, you better be ready. She didn't answer. She didn't move. He stepped outside, his boots crunching on the gravel, and she heard the creak of the barn door closing behind him. The badge was still there, heavy against her chest. She looked down at it for a moment, her fingers lingering on the edges. The name didn't feel as real as it had before. It felt distant, faded, but she didn't take it off. She couldn't. She whispered the name again, this time louder. James. The wind blew harder now, sending a gust of dust and hay into the barn. She looked up, and for just a moment, she thought she saw something moving in the shadows. A figure, familiar, but when she blinked, it was gone. She touched the badge one last time, letting it catch the light again. And then she walked out of the barn. The air was thick with dust as she pushed open the rotting door of the chapel. It creaked and groaned, as if protesting her intrusion, but she didn't care. The walls were crumbling, the stained glass windows shattered, and the once grand pews now lay broken, their wood splintered by time and neglect. A scent of old wood, mildew, and something sweeter, like decay, hung in the air. She moved forward, her boots dragging through the dirt that had once been a holy place. It wasn't the first time she'd come here. The chapel had always been a place of whispers, of memories that refused to fade. But today was different. Today, she followed the sound. The soft rhythmic hum that floated through the broken walls like a prayer. She stepped carefully over the rubble, each footfall loud in the silence. The humming grew louder as she neared the altar, where the figure of a boy sat. His hands moved skillfully, carving something into a piece of wood. The soft scrape of the knife against the grain was the only sound that filled the space now. He didn't look up when she entered, didn't even acknowledge her presence. She stood there for a long moment, watching him. His back was hunched slightly, and his hands worked with a slow, practiced rhythm. The boy was young, no more than 12, maybe 13, but his face was pale, his eyes dark and empty, like he had never seen the light of day. His hair hung in tangles around his face, and his clothes were little more than rags. She didn't speak at first. There didn't seem to be any point. She just watched as he carved the spoon, the knife moving in careful, deliberate strokes. His movements were too calm, too steady, considering where they were. The chapel was a hollow shell of what it had once been, but here he sat, untouched by the ruin around him. Finally, she stepped forward, her voice low but clear. "You saw him too, didn't you?" The boy didn't look up, didn't pause in his work, but his hands stilled for a moment, just enough to show she had his attention. Then, without a word, he nodded once. She stepped closer, crouching down beside him. Her fingers brushed against the rough edges of the wooden spoon. He continued his carving, steady and unhurried, like it was the only thing that mattered. She waited, but he didn't speak. She knew better than to expect words from him. He hadn't spoken since she found him here months ago. No one had heard him speak. Not a single word. He had never cried, never screamed, just sat, silent. Like the chapel, like the ruins, like everything around him. She watched him for a moment longer, then whispered, "What's your name?" His hands paused again, but only for a second. Then he set the knife down gently beside the spoon and looked up at her, his eyes dark and unreadable. She could feel the weight of them, like he was seeing straight through her. He signed something with his fingers, the movements slow and deliberate. She watched him closely, the signs foreign but familiar at the same time. He had learned to communicate in a language she didn't know. She tilted her head, trying to make sense of it, then signed back the only name she knew. Her name. "My name's Anna," she said quietly. The boy's eyes flickered, but he didn't respond. Instead, he signed something else. She frowned, confused. His hands moved quickly this time, and she couldn't follow. "Wait," she said, reaching out to stop him. "What did you say?" He signed again, but his hands were faster than she could follow, the words too complicated, too fast for her to understand. Finally, he stopped and pointed to the carved spoon. His eyes never left her face as he signed again, this time more deliberately. "I don't know what that means," she said softly, shaking her head. He picked up the knife and went back to his work, carving the spoon as if she wasn't even there. The quiet hum began again, the melody soft and steady. She watched him for a long moment, her mind racing with questions. Who was he? Why? Hadn't he spoken? Why didn't he cry? And what did his name mean? She swallowed hard, but the questions stuck in her throat. The weight of them felt heavier with every passing second. She had thought the town was full of ghosts, of things better left alone. But this boy, this mute child, was something else entirely. He wasn't a ghost. He was flesh and bone, but he was something broken, something lost, something not entirely there. She stood up slowly, her feet shuffling through the dirt. The boy didn't notice. His hands never stopped moving, never hesitated. She looked around the chapel, the ruins of what had once been something holy, something pure. Now it was just a shell, a memory, a place for the broken to gather. She took a step toward the door, but before she left, she glanced back at him. The humming had stopped. He was silent now, but his hands kept working, carving the spoon in steady, practiced strokes. She said one more thing, barely above a whisper, "What's your name?" He didn't answer. He didn't even look up. But as she stepped outside, a flicker of movement caught her eye. The spoon he had carved, now finished, was placed on the altar. She couldn't help but feel a shiver run through her. The boy was still carving, still creating, but what he had carved wasn't for her. It was for something else, something she couldn't yet understand. The farmhouse was nothing but a skeleton. The roof caved in years ago, and the walls had crumbled under the weight of time and fire. The place she once called home had become a place of ashes and broken memories, barely more than charred wood and smoke-stained air. The air still carried the sting of burnt timbers, but it had lost the bite of heat. Everything here was cold now. She stood at the edge of what used to be the hearth. The stone chimney was still there, jagged and blackened, like a wound that refused to heal. The boy stood beside her, his eyes scanning the ruins in silence, his hands still, though she could feel him brimming with something. Curiosity, or maybe just the quiet that always came with the loss of home. They hadn't spoken much since the chapel, but they didn't need to. Their silence spoke volumes, the same unspoken things between them. The absence of sound filled every space. She took a slow step forward, her boots crunching on the brittle floor beneath her. Her fingers brushed over the soot that clung to the stones of the chimney. They were covered in the remnants of a fire that had swallowed everything, the life, the warmth, the smell of bread baking in the oven, but not the name. That wasn't gone, not entirely. She kneeled down, brushing away the dirt and ash with her palms, her heart pounding in her chest. The boy didn't move, didn't make a sound. Her fingers scraped over the rough surface of the chimney, digging through the soot. At first, it felt like nothing, just the heavy blackness of the fire's aftermath. Then, her fingers hit something harder, something smooth. She paused for a moment, staring at the small patch of stone she had uncovered, and then she saw it. The first letter, scratched into the soot like it was meant to stay. She ran her fingers over the markings, her breath shallow, her heart skipping a beat. It was her name, Anna. The word lingered in the air, like it was calling her back, like it wanted her to remember. Her fingers moved, tracing the next set of letters. They came easy, like they had always been there, buried in the ashes, waiting for her to find them. The next word, the next name, his name, James. She whispered it under her breath, barely a sound. She didn't need to say it louder. It echoed in the ruin, in the spaces where his voice used to be. It clung to her skin like it had never left. The boy shifted behind her. She didn't look up, didn't ask him if he saw it too. She knew he did. She reached deeper into the soot, scraping her nails against the stone, uncovering more letters. The movements felt like they were out of her control, like something inside her had unlocked with the discovery of these words. The letters formed another name, but not one she recognized. The scribbled initials were faint, buried deeper than the others. WB. She paused, her hand hovering over the last part, the final letters she couldn't yet make sense of. They looked almost like they'd been scratched hastily. Before she could uncover more, the boy stepped forward, his fingers brushing the floorboards near the hearth. He knelt down, his eyes scanning the space in front of him, as if drawn to something she hadn't yet noticed. He pushed the dust aside, his hands working quickly. There was something there, something hidden. She didn't speak. She only watched as he pulled away the old floorboard with ease, revealing a dark space beneath. The light from the broken roof overhead flickered, casting a pale glow on the hidden cavity. Inside, half covered in soot and debris, was an old ledger. She hadn't seen it before. She hadn't known it was there. But she knew, as soon as her fingers brushed against it, that it was important. It was old, leather-bound, cracked along the spine, and it was as if the weight of years had sealed it inside the floor. The boy didn't look at her as he handed it over. She opened it carefully, the pages yellowed with age, brittle at the edges. She flipped through them, her heart beginning to race with every turn of the page. The words on the pages were faded, but the ink was still legible, just enough for her to make out the names, the dates, the initials. The first few entries were nothing unusual, lists of payments, debts, and deliveries. But then, her fingers stopped. A phrase caught her eye. One repeated over and over like it was a mantra. Winter took what didn't belong. The words seemed to pulse with some kind of energy, like they were alive, like they were meant to be. Remembered. She turned the page, but it was there again, and again. Winter took what didn't belong. She whispered the words aloud, her voice trembling. The boy knelt beside her, his eyes scanning the ledger. She could see it in his face, in the way his fingers lingered on the page. He didn't need to ask. He already knew. She turned the page again, desperate now. The words weren't just there. They were everywhere, written in different places, scattered across the pages. There were dates, names, some familiar, others not, but they all led to the same thing. Winter. It was always winter. She closed the book slowly, the weight of it pressing on her chest. She felt the burn of it, the pull of it. It wasn't just a ledger, it was a warning. The boy reached out, touching her arm lightly. His sign was quick, his hands moving fast. It's not just the fire. Her throat tightened, the words echoing in her mind. She looked at the ledger one last time. The answers were here. The truth was buried beneath the ashes, beneath the cold, beneath everything she thought she understood. But she didn't know how to find it. Not yet. The steps were worn, the wood creaking with every footfall as she descended into the dimly lit space beneath the courthouse. The air smelled stale, damp from the old stone and rotting wood that had been left to rot for years. The shadows clung to the corners, wrapping around her as she moved deeper, feeling the weight of the town press down on her shoulders. Her breath was shallow, the sound of it lost in the stillness. She hadn't come here expecting anything, but the moment she reached the bottom, her eyes locked onto it. The cradle, there in the center of the room, undisturbed, its wooden slats smooth and worn with time, rocking gently back and forth. It seemed impossible, like the world had stopped to watch it. No sound, no wind, just the slow, rhythmic creak of the cradle. She stopped in her tracks, her chest tightening. It was exactly where she had left it, exactly as she remembered. There was no dust, no sign of disturbance, but the motion. It was there, still rocking, as if waiting. Her voice broke the silence. Who left it here? The question hung in the air like a ghost. She didn't expect an answer. Not from this place. Not from the darkness that had consumed everything she knew. But then a voice came from the shadows, low, steady, like it had been waiting for her to speak. You did. She froze, her heart hammering in her chest. She knew that voice. It was the judge. She couldn't see him yet, but she could feel him. He was watching, waiting, like always. She stepped closer to the cradle, her hands trembling as she reached for it. The wood was cold to the touch, the rocking movement unnerving, like it had a life of its own. She stood there for a long moment, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she tried to steady herself. You left him here. The judge's voice echoed again. You always leave him behind. The words hit harder than she expected, the weight of them pressing into her chest. She swallowed hard, her throat dry, as she turned toward the source of the voice. Slowly, from the shadows, the judge stepped forward, his silhouette barely visible against the dim light. He was tall, his face shadowed by the brim of his hat. His boots echoed on the wooden floor as he approached, the sound sharp and deliberate. You think it's over? The judge asked, his voice rough, almost bored. You think running away will fix it? I never ran, she snapped, her voice trembling but fierce. I tried to fix it. His lips curled into a smile, one she couldn't see but felt in her bones. No, you didn't. You left him here. You left him all alone. Her eyes flicked to the cradle again. The rocking hadn't stopped. The soft creak of the wood filled her ears, and for a moment it was all she could hear. The weight of the judge's words pressed on her chest. She wanted to scream, to run, to break it all apart, but she couldn't. Not here, not now. She stepped forward, her voice shaking as she called out again, "Why didn't you stop me?" The judge didn't answer right away. He didn't need to. The silence was his answer. She had done it. She had left him. She had done everything she was told, everything the town expected, and in the end, the cradle had stayed, rocking, waiting. Her hands tightened around the edge of the cradle, and she shouted, "You were supposed to protect him. You were supposed to—" A sharp sound cut her off, the unmistakable echo of boots, heavy and fast. She turned toward the sound, her pulse quickening as the sheriff's figure emerged from the shadows, his boots loud against the planks. The light from the courthouse door barely touched him, but she could see enough to know it was him. The sheriff stepped into the dim space, his eyes cold, unblinking. "You're too late," the sheriff said, his voice low and almost amused. "You should have come sooner." Her heart lurched in her chest. Her mind scrambled to make sense of the moment. The sheriff, the judge, the cradle. It was all too much. Too many questions and too many answers she didn't want to hear. She reached for the cradle, her fingers trembling as she touched the edge again. The movement didn't stop. It never stopped. The weight of everything, the lost years, the silence, the fear, crashed down on her, and for a moment she wanted to fall to her knees and let it all go. But she didn't. She couldn't. She couldn't give them that. The sheriff's boots clicked louder now, his approach steady and unhurried. She could feel his gaze on her back, heavy, like it was pressing her down. "You think it matters?" the sheriff asked, his voice rougher now. "You think it matters if you stop the cradle?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. The question lingered in the air between them, too heavy to move. The cradle rocked slowly, each creak louder now, like it was demanding something. The sheriff stepped closer, his hand reaching toward the cradle, brushing the edge lightly. The sound of his fingers on the wood sent a chill down her spine. She looked at him, the fear in her chest turning into something else, something darker. "I didn't leave him," she whispered. "I didn't. I just didn't know what to do." The sheriff's eyes flicked to the cradle and then back to her. There was something in his gaze, something that said he knew, something that told her there was no escaping it. "You didn't have a choice," the sheriff said quietly. "None of us did." The cradle continued to rock, steady and unyielding. And in the silence that followed, she finally understood. The past didn't let go. And neither would they. He laid them out slowly, one by one, on the floor between them. The barn was cold, the wind sneaking in through the boards, but he didn't shiver. He never did. His hands were steady as ever, dirt under the nails, fingers cracked from carving. Each spoon was small, rough-edged, shaped by time and silence. She sat across from him, knees tucked beneath her, coat still stained from the courthouse steps. "There's more," she said, voice low. "The ledger had more names than this." He didn't nod, didn't look up. He just kept laying them out, each handle marked with initials, a notch, or a tiny carved letter. 23 spoons. She counted twice. She picked one up. "SM," she read. She was the one with the blue ribbon, right? He tapped twice on the wood. A yes. "And this one, JW. He was the preacher's boy." He nodded again. She set them down carefully like the names still had breath left. The air inside the barn felt wrong now, too still, like the wind was holding its breath outside. She reached the end of the row. 23, she whispered, his hand stilled. There were 24 names. He didn't move. He didn't need to. She looked at him. "Whose is missing?" He reached behind him, pulled the ledger from the bag, and flipped to the final page. The ink had bled slightly, water damage or old tears, but the name was still there, barely legible. AM. Her throat caught. She touched the spoon closest to her. Then I looked at the knife. "You never carved her." His hands dropped to his lap. He signed slowly. "I didn't know how." She stared at the blade, the wood shavings scattered across the dirt floor like snowflakes that never melted. "Is she yours?" she asked. His eyes didn't answer, but something in his face did. She reached for the unfinished block of wood, fingers brushing his. He didn't pull away. She took the carving knife next, the handle warm from his grip. Her hand trembled. "You sure?" she asked. He nodded once. She sat straighter, brought the block closer. The wart whined outside, pressed harder against the walls, like it wanted to come inside, like it wanted to see. The first cut was shallow, just enough to start the curve of the bowl. She'd never carved anything before, not like this, but her hand moved easily. The grain guided her. He watched her, silent, but alert. Every time she hesitated, he reached out, steadying the knife. Their hands moved together, a slow rhythm. She carved the lip of the spoon, rough but round. Then the handle, long, thin. At the end, she looked at him. "What mark?" He didn't answer at first. Then he signed one word, "Flower." She nodded, pressed the knife into the handle. "Draw the shape slowly. 4 petals, then a stem." The barn creaked. The wind found a hole in the roof and howled through it like a cry too old to trace. She didn't stop, not even when the boards moaned beneath them or the animals outside grew restless. When the spoon was done, she placed it gently beside the others. It looked different, less perfect, but more alive. He stared at it for a long time, then he picked it up and pressed it to his heart. "Is she yours?" she asked again. He didn't nod. He didn't have to. She leaned back, resting her hands on her knees, breathing deep for the first time since they'd left the courthouse. Her voice was quieter now. "You know what this means." He signed, "They'll come." She shook her head. "They're already here." He looked at her, confused. The judge knew. The sheriff knows. The others, maybe they forgot, but not all of them. She reached for the ledger, flipped through the pages again. The phrase was still there, again and again. Winter took what didn't belong. She traced it with her finger. "You think that's true?" He shrugged. She looked down at the spoons, each one a name, each one a body once buried or burned or forgotten. "They belonged," she said. "They all did." The boy watched her. Then he signed slowly. "Then so do we." She almost smiled. Almost. But the wind picked up again, sharper now. Something slammed outside. Not the wind. Something heavier. They both looked toward the door. "Are you expecting someone?" she asked. He shook his head. She picked up the knife again, turning it in her hand. "If they come, we don't run." He nodded. "We show them," she said. The boy signed one word, "Truth." She looked at the flower on the spoon. The last one was carved. "Then let's finish it," she said. And this time, the wind didn't fight them. It passed over the barn and moved on. The sound of boots on dirt came first, heavy, deliberate. She didn't move, didn't even blink. She knew who it was before she saw him. The governor always carried the same weight with him, like the land beneath him had to bear the burden of his every step. The door creaked open, and he walked flanked by 2 men with rifles slung over their shoulders. His suit was too clean for this place, too pressed, like he'd just stepped out of a city far removed from the dust and decay of her life. His eyes scanned the room, but his gaze landed on her almost immediately. He stopped at the threshold, and for a moment, all she could hear was the wind howling outside. He didn't speak right away. He just stood there, staring at her in the dirt-covered dress she hadn't bothered to change. The dirt, the wear, the look of someone who had long given up caring what anyone thought. "You're her, aren't you?" he finally said, his voice smooth but heavy, like he was pronouncing some judgment. She didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She stared back at him, eyes cold, unfeeling. "No," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "She died 5 winters ago." The governor tilted his head slightly, his eyes narrowing. His men shifted behind him, uneasy under her steady gaze, but they didn't speak. They never did. The boy was behind her, just out of the governor's line of sight. She didn't have to look to know he was there. She could feel him. His presence was a quiet thing, his hum low and constant, like a steady beat in the background of everything. He never hid, never shrank back, even when men like this came to town. The hum, faint at first, rose now, a soft melody, a lullaby almost, but laced with something older, something the governor could hear if he chose to listen. The governor did listen. He stood there for too long, staring at her, letting the silence fill the space between them. The air in the room thickened, and the governor's eyes flicked toward the boy, then back to her. His gaze lingered on her dress, the way it clung to her like the remnants of a life she hadn't quite let go of. "I'm not here for the past," the governor said, his voice a little sharper now. "I'm here to fix things, to restore order." She didn't move, didn't react. Her hands were folded in front of her, steady, calm. The boy's hum seemed louder now, filling the room, echoing off the walls like it had a purpose of its own. "Restore?" she repeated, her voice soft, like she was trying to understand the word for the first time. "What do you plan to restore, Governor? What's left here to fix?" The governor's lips pressed into a thin line, and he stepped closer, his boots scraping the dirt floor, the sound grating against the stillness. His men remained at the door, like sentinels, watching but saying nothing. "I've come to make sure this place stays in line," the governor said, his voice flat, almost rehearsed. "The law needs to be upheld." "Law?" She spat the word out like it was bitter. "The law has nothing to do with this town." The boys' humming stopped, a sudden silence falling between them like the wind had been cut off. "You think the law doesn't have a place here?" The governor's tone was dangerous now, sharper than before. "You think you can just live outside of it?" The boy moved then, stepping into the light, his hum now gone, replaced by a soft, steady breath. He was just a boy. Just a child. His clothes were old, patched, too big for him, but there was something about him. Something the governor couldn't ignore. The boy didn't speak. He didn't need to. He didn't even look at the governor. He just stood there, his dark eyes locked on her. The governor's eyes flicked to him again, his expression faltering for a second, but he quickly masked it. "This is my town," the governor said, his voice firm, "and I don't care what stories you've told yourself. You don't get to decide who stays and who goes." The boy hummed again, this time quieter, a note of sadness woven into the melody. She knew what it meant. She had heard it enough times. The governor didn't understand, couldn't hear the truth in it. He didn't know what it meant to live with silence, with the ghosts of things long gone. She took a slow breath, her hands tightening slightly around the fabric of her dress. "Then why are you here?" she asked, her voice soft, but there was steel behind it. "Why come here and stir up what's already buried?" The governor didn't answer right away. He took another step forward, and she could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes. He wanted something from her, something more than just her land or her silence. He wanted her to bow to him, to acknowledge that he held the power, but he wouldn't get that from her. Not today. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, her voice cutting through the air between them. "You won't get what you want. Not from me. Not from anyone here." The governor's eyes narrowed, his lips tightening, and for a moment he looked like he was about to speak, to make some final demand. But then he stopped. The boy's humming grew louder, filled the space between them, and for the first time, the governor seemed to listen. Really listen. He looked at the boy, and for the first time, the smile faltered. He didn't see a child. He didn't see innocence. He saw something else, something he couldn't control, something that made him hesitate. The governor took one last long look at her, at the boy, and turned toward the door. His men followed, stepping back into the shadows, leaving the room empty once again. She didn't move. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The boy's hum faded as the door clicked shut behind them. The silence returned, but it felt different now. He had heard them. He had heard her. He dragged her by the wrist, fast and mean, his grip tighter than it needed to be. The ground slipped under her boots, dry dust kicking up with every step. She didn't fight him. Not yet. The path was one she knew too well. Worn dirt, brittle weeds, the twisted oak by the fence line. The place no one went to anymore. The well stood in the clearing like a scar, stones dark with age, wood frame splintered but still. Standing. The rope hung loose, limp, but the hook was still there, iron and rust bent just enough to catch memory by the throat. He shoved her forward. She caught herself on the stone rim. "You want answers?" He barked, voice thick with spit and rage. "Ask the hole you filled." She turned her head slowly, met his eyes without blinking. Her lips didn't part. Her breath didn't rush. He stepped back, hands shaking now. "Go on. Look." She did. The well was deeper than she remembered, bone dry, the bottom layered in dust and leaves and rot. But it wasn't empty. Hanging from the hook, fluttering like it still remembered her breath on it, was the scarf. Faded blue, frayed at the edge. The one she wrapped around James that night when his cries wouldn't stop and the fire had gone cold. She stared at it. The scarf swayed once, slow, like it recognized her. She didn't scream. She grabbed the rope instead. "What the hell are you doing?" the sheriff snapped. She didn't answer. She slung the rope around her shoulder and climbed over the edge, her boots scraping stone. Her palms burned with every inch she descended, but she didn't stop. "Get back up here," she kept going. "You don't get to crawl back into it now," he shouted. She was halfway down. The rope creaked under her weight. Dust fell around her like ash. The air smelled like earth and old wood. and something that had died long ago. She didn't look up. She looked down. When her boots hit the bottom, the sound was soft, hollow. The silence was different here, heavier. It wasn't just lack of sound. It was memory, sealed and waiting. She crouched low. Her fingers swept through the layers of dirt, slow, careful. Her hands moved like they already knew where to go. She felt it before she saw it. Hard plastic, round. She pulled it free. The doll's head, still pink. The painted eyes faded, one lash missing. Her breath caught. She turned it over in her hand, thumb brushing the old crack along the seam. She remembered that crack. James had dropped the doll 3 nights before he stopped crying. The sound it made when it hit the floor was sharp, final. She clutched the head to her chest. Dirt clung to her coat, her skin, her throat. Still, she didn't cry. Above her, the sheriff was pacing. "You think crawling in a hole makes you clean?" he called down. "Think it wipes what you did?" She didn't answer. "I buried them, you just watched." She looked up slowly. "You call that burying?" He leaned over the edge. "What do you call it?" She stood, lifting the scarf from the hook. She tied it around her neck like it never left. "I call it hiding," she said. He barked a laugh. "You gonna climb back up and act like that makes you better?" No. She bent again, digging further. Her hands struck something harder than dirt. A slat of wood, rotten, thin. She pulled it free. Underneath, bone, small, curled. Like it still remembered warmth. The sheriff's voice cracked now. "Stop digging." She didn't. He slammed his palm against the stone rim. "I said stop." "You said a lot of things," she murmured. She pulled another piece from the earth. It wasn't much, just splinters and string and something that used to be a booty. Blue, knitted. She held it in both hands. Above her, the sheriff was breathing hard, boots shifting, gun belt rattling. "Get up here," he hissed. She looked up again. "I think I will." She tied the doll's head to her belt, tucked the booty into her coat, wrapped the scarf tighter. She started climbing. The rope creaked again, loud in the silence. Her arms ached, but she pulled, one knot at a time, until her hands met stone. He didn't help her up. She hauled herself over the rim alone, boots scraping, knees hitting hard. They stood staring at each other. The air between them is tight. She stepped past him. He caught her arm. "Where do you think you're going?" She looked at his hand. "I came down once," she said. "Now I'm going to talk." "To who?" She pulled her arm free. "Anyone still breathing." He grabbed her again, tighter this time. "You talk, and you'll wish you stayed in that hole." She looked him dead in the eye. "I already did." His grip loosened. She walked. He didn't follow. Behind her, the well stood still. The scarf was gone. The air didn't move. The wind didn't speak. But the ground remembered. The church looked smaller than before, colder. The light that filtered through the broken windows felt grayer now, like even the sun wasn't sure it belonged here anymore. She pushed open the warped door and stepped inside. The pews were crooked, some splintered, others stained. The altar still held dust thick enough to write names in. The boy was already there. He sat cross-legged in front of the altar, humming that same quiet tune, the one that bent time around itself. The ledger lay beside him, closed now. His hands moved as she approached, slow and deliberate. He held something between his fingers, delicate, folded small. She crouched beside him. He placed it in her palm, a ribbon, pale blue, thin, wrinkled, knotted at one end, faded, but the pattern still held, a row of stitched white flowers, almost invisible now. He tapped his chest, then signed one word, "Midwives." She looked down at it. "Where?" He pointed at himself, then made the shape of a box. "Buried," he signed. "In my crib." Her breath caught. "Why would it be there?" He didn't answer. She turned the ribbon over in her hand, thumb tracing the knots. One loop was darker, faint, but there. A faint ring of dried red. The boy nodded toward the back of the church. She followed his gaze. A woman sat alone in the last pew, rigid, hair pulled tight, gray at the edges. Her hands clasped so tightly in her lap they looked like one. She didn't speak, didn't move. The sheriff's sister. The boy stayed where he was, humming softer now, like the sound was meant to wrap around the woman too. She stood and walked the aisle slowly, the ribbon still in her hand. "You knew the midwife?" she asked. The woman didn't lift her head. "She delivered us all." "And this?" She held the ribbon up. "This is yours." The woman looked, eyes blinking once, like memory took a second to pull itself forward. My mama tied that to my cradle, she said, voice flat. To ward off fever. She stood, took 2 small steps forward, then reached out and touched the edge of the ribbon. I haven't seen it since I was 10. It was in his crib, she said, nodding toward the boy. Buried with him. The woman's face twisted. Her lips moved before the sound came. He wasn't buried right. She didn't respond. The woman looked at the ribbon again. You think that makes it mine? She shrugged. You tell me. The woman took it from her hand gently like it might dissolve. She turned it over once, then pressed it to her lips. Mama was the midwife's sister. They used the same cloth for all of us. Birth ribbons, safety charms. She looked at the boy now. How'd he get it? I think he was one of hers. The woman laughed once, bitter, short. She didn't have children. She helped bury them. Silence. She stepped back, letting the woman have space. The ribbon looked small in her hand. Lighter, like it didn't carry what it once did. She looked at the altar, then the boy. I had a doll, she whispered, tied with this same thread. I know. The sheriff broke it, told me to stop crying or I'd end up like her. Your mother? No. She looked at her. The midwife. She walked slowly to the front pew and knelt. Her back was stiff, but she reached for the matchbox tucked beneath the rail. Her fingers trembled. The boy watched from the altar, still humming. She lit a candle. The flame shook once, then held. Her name was Delia, the woman said. Not that it matters now. It does. The woman sat back down. I remember her hands. Always red, always warm. I remember her singing while she worked. She touched the flame. When she disappeared, I asked if she went to heaven. My father said, not likely. The ribbon dropped into her lap. She buried the babies they didn't want. The ones that weren't born right. The ones born to the wrong women. The church seemed quieter now, like the walls were listening. She looked at the boy. He nodded. The woman's voice cracked. We don't talk about her. Not in this town. You just did. I don't know if that's good. She stepped closer, held out her hand. The woman didn't take it. She's still here, she said. The woman stared at the flame. I know. They stood, like that, both watching the candle until the flame dipped low. The boy's hum filled the space again, softer now, just enough to carry. She walked back toward the altar, sat beside the boy again. He handed her another spoon. It had no name, not yet. She took the carving knife from her pocket. Delia, she said. The boy signed it slowly. They carved it together. No words. The candle kept burning. She walked through the town with the cradle strapped to her back, ropes cut into her shoulders, but she didn't adjust them. Let it bite. Let it show. The spoon was in her coat pocket, the badge pinned crooked on her chest, the ledger pressed flat against her ribs like a second heart. The weight of it all made her walk slower, straight. The townsfolk didn't stop her. They saw her coming and stepped aside, some out of fear, others out of shame. No one asked what she carried. No one offered help. They watched. That's all this place had ever done. She climbed the judge's steps before dusk. 3 quick knocks. Then she kicked the door in. The house smelled like old perfume and cold ink. Curtains drawn. Air still. Dust in the corners. She didn't pause at the threshold. She walked straight down the hallway, boots heavy against the polished floor. She found him in the study, hunched over a fireless hearth, 2 fingers to his lips like they could keep time still. He looked up slowly, took her in piece by piece, the cradle first. You came to return it, he asked, voice quiet. No, she said. I came to watch it burn. She dropped the cradle in the center of the room. It landed with a dry thud, rocking once before settling flat. The judge winced. She tossed the ledger onto his lap, then the spoon onto the cradle's edge. Last, she touched the badge at her collar, unclipped it, and let it fall at his feet. He stared at the mess of it, like it was a puzzle he'd forgotten how to solve. You know what this is, she said. He looked at her, voice cracked. Too well. I want you to say it. I don't say those damn towns. You already did. He picked up the ledger, flipped the pages without reading. How many names? He asked. 24. He nodded once, slow. I thought more would follow. She knelt by the cradle, reached for the kindling she brought in her bag. A small glass bottle, rags soaked in kerosene. She moved without rush. You really gonna do it? He asked. Yes. He stood. His knees cracked. That cradle belonged to the midwife. Before that, it belonged to my brother's wife. I know. I remember when she wrapped the first ribbon. Me too. He stepped back as she poured the kerosene over the cradle's slats. It soaked in fast. The spoon caught the scent. She laid it on top. You want me to stop you? He asked. No. He watched her strike the match. The flame bloomed softly, small at first. She held it steady. You know what happens if you light that? He said. I stopped pretending I don't remember. The match hit the wood. Flame crawled quick, hungry, the cradle catching like it had been waiting. The fire climbed the legs, licked the spoon, curled around the frame. The judge flinched. I told them, he whispered. I told them winter wouldn't hide it forever. She didn't speak. She stepped back. The heat grew sharp, the air thick. He dropped into his chair, eyes fixed on the blaze. The flames reflected in his glasses, in his tears. I signed every certificate, he said. Buried every record, but I never lied. Not once. Silence is still a lie. The fire roared louder. The cradle cracked. A ribbon caught and twisted black. They said it was mercy, he whispered. Said the babies wouldn't live. Said the girls wouldn't be believed. She looked down at the badge on the floor. It had melted slightly. Bent now. Worthless. You signed their names away. I did. You called them winter's mistake. I did. The flames reached the ceiling now, smoke curling fast. He didn't move. They'll come, he said. I know. They'll say you set a fire. I did. They'll say it was murder. I'm fine with that. He coughed once. Then again. She turned to go. He didn't stop her. I see her sometimes, he said. She paused in the doorway. The midwife, standing by the well, holding something I can't name. She looked back once. The cradle collapsed in the heat, cinders falling like ash. She's not holding something, she said. She's waiting to take it back. He smiled once, thin, tired. Good. She stepped into the hall. Smoke followed her. Behind her, the judge stayed in his chair. She didn't hear him call for help. She didn't hear him stand. The house groaned, then roared. She kept walking. The townsfolk stood in the street now, watching the flames. No one reached for water. No one asked what burned. She passed them slowly. The cradle was gone. The badge was gone. The ledger burned too, but the names, those she kept. And the smoke didn't chase her. It followed its own guilt. The rain came hard, fast. No warning, no thunder. Just a sheet of cold water falling from a sky that had stayed shut too long. It soaked the dirt roads, the chapel's roof, the splintered barn, the courthouse stone. It soaked her hair, her boots, her dress. She didn't run. She let it fall. It felt earned. She stood at the edge of the clearing, the earth soft beneath her boots. Her hands were muddy, up to the wrists, fingers raw from digging. The boy knelt beside her, silent but calm, sleeves pushed to the elbows, his palms cupped to catch the rain like it meant something. They had picked this spot together, between the crooked tree and the old fence line. No marker, no sign, just the earth. And the spoons. 24. Names 24 pieces of carved wood, each one buried by hand. One for every name in the ledger. One for every child that had been erased. She held the last spoon now, the smallest. No markings, no initials, just smooth wood and silence. The boy hummed as she pressed it into the mud. Low, steady, the same tune he always carried in his chest. It didn't rise or fall, it just held. She didn't speak, she didn't pray. She pressed the spoon into the soil and covered it with her hands. Behind them the sheriff watched. He knelt in the mud, coat gone, badge gone, hair plastered to his forehead. He looked smaller now, like the rain had stripped him of something he'd been pretending to hold. His mouth didn't move. His hands were empty. He just stared. She stood slowly, wiping her palms on her dress. Her eyes didn't go to him. She looked at the line of fresh dirt, the shape of each small grave. No headstones, no crosses, just memory. The boy's hum didn't stop. It carried through the rain, the rhythm never breaking. Finally, the sheriff spoke, voice flat, tired. You really buried 'em? She nodded. Even the ones no one named. All of them. His jaw twitched. Why here? Because they deserve to be known. He looked at the spoons, barely visible now under the pooling water. And if they're forgotten again, they won't be. He didn't argue. He shifted in the mud, his knees sinking deeper. His hand went to his side like muscle memory reached for a gun that wasn't there. He blinked slowly. You kept the boy quiet all this time. She turned her head. He chose silence. "He's not mine, is he?" The question hung there. She didn't answer right away. She just looked at the boy, still kneeling, still humming, his fingers tracing invisible shapes in the puddle forming at his feet. "He never was," she said. The sheriff closed his eyes. Rain rolled down his cheeks, but it didn't look like crying, more like surrender. "I told your father we'd fix it," he said, voice low. "You didn't. I thought we were doing the right thing." "You weren't." He wiped at his face, more mud than water now. "I buried 3 of them myself. I thought I was protecting this town. You buried shame." He looked at her finally. "And the midwife. You let her disappear. She bled too easily. I said too much." She was the only one telling the truth. He didn't argue. She walked past him, slow, the rain hitting her shoulders like the sky had hands. The boys stood and followed. The sheriff stayed on his knees. When she reached the old fence line, she turned once more. The sheriff was looking down now, at the badge she had buried beside the spoons. It was barely visible in the mud, bent, blackened at the edge. He touched it once with 2 fingers, then let it go. "Let it rot," she said. He didn't look up. She and the boy walked on. The humming faded with the wind, but the rain didn't stop. It kept falling, like it knew something had broken open that couldn't be patched, like the sky had waited too long to weep. She knelt beside the well, the same one she'd climbed into, the same one that had once held more silence than water. The sky above was pale, not blue, not gray, just quiet. The ground was damp but soft. No frost, no ice creeping in from the edges. The rain had stopped the night before. What remained now was the hush that comes after something is finally heard. She pressed her palm flat against the earth. It wasn't cold. The boy sat a few feet behind her, legs crossed, back straight. He didn't hum. He didn't carve. He just waited, watching her with the kind of patience that comes from knowing something's over, even if it never got a name. She dragged her fingers through the dirt. Slow. 1 circle. Then another, a line beneath them. Then the smallest mark for a mouth. This one she made carefully. She didn't rush. It was a face, but not the baby's, not the doll's, not the midwife's. It was hers, older, worn, still here. She leaned back and looked at it. It wasn't perfect. The rain had made the soil too soft, too quick to smear, but it held long enough. Behind her, the boy stood. He stepped close, crouched beside her. She didn't look at him. She didn't need to. He tapped her shoulder once. She turned. He signed a single word. "Home." She held his gaze, then nodded. She didn't cry. She didn't reach for him. Didn't speak. She just touched the face she'd drawn, one last time, pressing her fingers into the curve of the cheek like she wanted to feel it become real. The soil was warm, not from the sun, not from fire, just warm. The cradle was gone, nothing left but ash somewhere far behind them. The ledger burned. The badge is buried. The spoons laid to rest in mud and memory. She stood slowly. The boy rose with her. They walked away from the well. Not quickly, not in silence, just steady. When they reached the fence line, she turned back once. The dirt still held her face, unmoving, unbroken. The ground had not frozen, and this time it wouldn't.